Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Today we're looking at the 2026 South Carolina U.S. Senate primary that took place on Tuesday. A lot of popular names here: Darline Graham, Ralph Norman, Russell Fry, Mark Sanford, Mark Lynch, lots of candidates in this race. This is to be the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate race in November to face off against Democrat Annie Andrews in this race. So we're going to break it all down here. First things first, it's important to note South Carolina election law, where the winning candidate must break 50% of the vote. If no candidate breaks 50% of the vote, then the two candidates that finished in first and second will advance to a runoff election to see which one of them will win in that runoff, and one candidate will obviously break 50% of the vote. So if you're a returning viewer of mine, you'll know we covered this video or this topic back in the Lindsey Graham race and the governor primary as well. And it's played out once again where there will be a runoff election as no candidate broke 50% of the vote here. But what we do know is with 335,094 votes, over 95% of the vote in, Darline Graham, the sister of late Senator Lindsey Graham, also the Republican appointed incumbent by the governor of the state and supported by President Trump, finished in first place, getting 32.71% of the vote, 109,604 votes across the state. In terms of overall vote numbers here, the two of the largest are total registration across the state of South Carolina: Greenville, Horry County by population, Charleston, all split between Ralph Norman, Russell Fry, and Darline Graham here. But you see across the state in the purple areas were won by Graham. She ran up the vote very strong in these areas, including right around Lexington and Richland, where the city of Columbia is. Augusta came in strongly for Graham as well, and on the border with Georgia near the city of Savannah and Beaufort County as well, coming in strongly for Darline Graham. She did well across the state to finish in first place, and she did very well in this part of the state, like the southern part, western part, and sort of the central part of South Carolina. And then Ralph Norman and Russell Fry and Mark Sanford all fought it out to finish in second place here. And it's really interesting how things kind of played out. You saw a few areas here among the district where Russell Fry did very well, and it's almost broken down exactly by their congressional districts. Russell Fry represents the 7th district in this portion of the state. Ralph Norman represents the 5th in this portion of the state, and their results exclusively came from these areas here. Ralph Norman does end up finishing second, getting 82,529 votes, 24.63% of the vote. Russell Fry finished in third, getting 19.62%, 65,739. And then Mark Sanford, the former governor of South Carolina, finishes in fourth, still getting a very considerable amount, 50,013 votes, about 14.93% of the vote. Mark Lynch, who was the chief opposition candidate to Lindsey Graham in the initial Republican primary, finishes down at about 5.93% here. You can look in some of these areas near Charleston, for instance. Darline Graham did ultimately win, 33.45%, though Sanford did do very well here. This must be an area that he is from, and he represents strongly in Charleston. Graham does hold on, though, and take a narrow win there. Russell Fry does well up near Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, in this part of the district that he represents, ran up the margins strongly here. But then we also saw Ralph Norman run up the margins up near Charlotte, on the border of Charlotte, North Carolina, and York County, and the district that Norman represents. These areas came in strongly for Ralph Norman as well. Overall, it made up for a very close race between Darline Graham, Ralph Norman, Russell Fry, Mark Sanford, and Mark Lynch here. Ultimately, Graham and Norman to finish in first and second place. And then the closest challenger, Russell Fry, a little bit shy of 20,000 votes behind Norman for second place on that. So it's going to be a runoff election between Graham and Norman. And that's where things are going to get very interesting for how it ultimately will shake out here. Because now that the Republican primary is officially in the books here, we know there'll be a runoff. I don't believe we know, there's no polling data as of yet for when this is going to be. I'm not entirely sure on the date when it's going to be taking place as well. I'm going to have to find out that information here. But, I mean, kind of similar to the last election, 32.7% for Graham, 24.6% for Norman. There's a good amount of vote that did not support either candidate in this primary, like Russell Fry, like Mark Sanford. It'll be interesting to see which candidate emerges in this Republican primary. Darline Graham already has the endorsement of Tim Scott after the primary. Russell Fry and Mark Sanford, both of which have already said they will not be making an endorsement in this runoff primary between Darline Graham and Ralph Norman. It's going to be interesting. because Darline Graham has the endorsement of President Trump, which obviously gives her a very important endorsement in the Republican primaries. But we've seen in the last few primary elections, President Trump's endorsement is not necessarily like foolproof. Like, that doesn't mean you're not going to win. Mike Lindell just lost on Tuesday. So Darline Graham, I would say, starts out as the favorite to win this primary, but I wouldn't count out Ralph Norman either. This could be a very sneakily close Republican primary in the runoff election between Darline Graham and Ralph Norman, but can't wait to see how that ultimately plays out. As for the general election, the winning candidate will be facing off against Annie Andrews, the Democratic nominee, who is a pediatrician and nominee for the South Carolina 1st District in 2022. For the general election, the rankings are a little bit mixed here, in between solid Republican, likely Republican, and lean Republican from various amounts of prediction sources, but definitely the consensus is that the Republicans have a narrow lead in this race, though Annie Andrews has already raised a good amount of money, roughly $10.8 million, and has about $4 million cash on hand. Ralph Norman versus Annie Andrews, the only poll from July that's currently factored in, has Norman up by about 1 point over Andrews in that poll. I don't believe Darline Graham yet was included in any polls in this race as of yet, so I'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. In terms of some of the forecasters I like to use, Race to the White House, they have Darline Graham winning that primary and advancing to the general election against Andrews, and then they have Graham winning about 12.5% projected margin of victory in the general election. They break it down as well by number. The state partisan lean gives an advantage for Graham about 13.5%. Experience winning gives Graham about 2.6%. Candidate quality, Republican plus 1.3%. In the head-to-head polling, the Republicans up about 0.2%. Approval polls, Democrats up 0.1%. And then overall factor for the national environment, Democrats up about 4.8%. So it ends up being about Republican plus 12.5%. On VoteHub, they have it currently listed Republicans 91% chance to win as Republican plus 9.6%. Though it's interesting, they do not currently have one Republican just as an eventual nominee. They don't have it as Darline Graham or Ralph Norman as of yet, but right around that 9.6% margin of victory in this race, which actually is a little bit, not a massive amount, but a little bit larger than it was a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, even like towards the beginning of July now, as we're getting closer there. 91% chance, though, for the Republicans to win. On the market side of things, the Republican nominee has about an 88% chance to win. Prediction market odds on Kalshi. Annie Andrews has about 13% chance to win there. And then for the Decision Desk HQ odds as well as I like to use, Republicans are currently at 87% chance to win. Andrews is at 13%. Their projected margin is Republican plus 11 with a Democrat generic ballot of 6.4% on their own rankings here. So for the primary, we do know that Darline Graham and Ralph Norman advance to the general election. Who ends up being the Republican candidate, Graham and Norman, is still a wait and see. You have to see how that primary will ultimately play out. But Graham and Norman advance to a runoff, and the winner will be facing off against Annie Andrews in the general election. In terms of what I'm expecting in that one, it'll be interesting to see here because Russell Fry and Mark Sanford combine again for like, what's this, about 35% of the vote, and Mark Lynch another 4% or 5% here. You're looking around like 40% of the vote in these three candidates that finish behind them. It'll be interesting to see, does Darline Graham or Ralph Norman, who consolidates that vote? Do they want to support the candidate endorsed by Donald Trump? Do they want someone who was not supported by Trump and Ralph Norman, but maybe is viewed as being a more traditional, like conservative? And Darline Graham, the sister of Lindsey Graham, do they want to honor Graham's legacy? Do they want to move in a different direction? It's going to be really interesting primary to see how it plays out. But for now, though, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it, and hope to see you in a future video. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, I really appreciate it if you could hit like and hit subscribe as well. It would really help me and my channel out a whole lot if you could do that for me. You can see in the circle in the top left the subscribe here button to subscribe to the channel. On the right, there are going to be two video pop-ups for you. My latest video will be on the top, and a recommended playlist by myself will be on the bottom as well. In the bottom left of the screen, you'll see my channel name, Anthony's Election Center, which you are currently watching. On my Facebook, Anthony.ElectionCenter is also there. And if you want to reach out to me on email, anthpredicts@gmail.com is my email. Feel free to pause the video if you need to. If you want to look for any of these, obviously in more time, please feel free. But for now, though, that is it. I really thank you all for watching and hope to see you in a future video.